ICQ Podcast episode 272, WRTC 2018 review. Well, hello everyone and welcome to this, our 272nd episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, which also coincides with our 10th birthday. We would like to thank our monthly and subscription donors for helping to keep us advert free as always. In this episode, Martin MNORB is joined by Leslie Golf Zero Charlie India Bravo, Edmund Mike Zero Mike November Golf, and Matthew Mike Zero November Juliet X-Ray to discuss latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode features a report from Ed DD5 Lima Papa in relation to the World Radio Team Championship that took place recently in Germany. Well, you may remembered a few weeks back, Bill Barnes, November 3 Juliet India X-Ray, sponsored a award from an event, a QSO party, multi-plaque winning team award, and he got a note from Evan Duffy, Kilo November 3 Oscar, who said thanks kindly for the support of the multi-plaque for the 2017 PA QSO party. I think it's PA Pennsylvania. Winning the contest plaque is always a real treat. The November 3 Tango Whiskey Mike team set out to break the Centre County multi-opera record. Myself, along with his colleagues, November Kilo 8 Quebec, Kilo 3 November Golf, November 2 Golf Bravo Romeo, and Kilo Charlie 3 Echo Hotel Quebec, accomplished this by operating multiple QRP multi. They won 3 plaques in total. Let's say the QRP, the multi, and the multiple portable plaques as part of their efforts. So congratulations there to you guys. Just as a piece of information for those who are interested, 3 of the radios they used were Elecraft KX3s, and the 4th was a K3 powered, was provided by a 2000 watt Honda generator and off the batteries of the radio themselves. So Evan, congratulations on winning the award. Thank you, Bill, for sponsoring that in the name of the ICQ podcast, and I say great to know that that's working wonders there. Now, our donors this episode keep us advert free are our monthly and subscription donors. We thank you for your continued support of the show. Keep us advert free. As mentioned, guys, it is our 10th birthday, so we'd ask you to pop along to icqpodcast.com and, as I say, check out the donations there. There is a new 10th birthday donation, which is now available. We just say you can get on board and do that sponsorship of the show from there. Well, now we head over to the news this episode, where Martin is joined by Leslie, Edmund, and Matthew. They're going to be discussing siblings on the radio assist in a road race, and also a massive pass rate in Cuba. Hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to the ICQ News Roundtable for episode 272. 272 seems a big number, but we're cracking on. Tonight, I have Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB. Hi, Leslie.
Good evening, Martin. The gremlins are with us on Skype tonight. We just hope everything all pans out good, because it's been a bit of a, shall we say, that Murphy's Law's been operating. Over to you.
Yeah, I know. And, 30 seconds before we started to record, Skype rebooted my machine, installed a new version, even though I'd had it all set up ready to go. And, and Edmund had the same problem, Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MMG, didn't you, Edmund?
I did. Skype did exactly the same thing to me. Good evening, Martin, and good evening, everybody.
Yeah, hi, Edmund. And we also have Matthew with us again this time, Mr. Matthew Nassau, M0NJX. Hi, Matt.
Hey, everybody. Hi.
Yeah, good to have you with us. And that's 3 in a row, Matt. That's getting close to being a record.
I've got my lottery tickets already lined up. Something. I feel lucky, Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, Mr. Bill Barnes, N3JIX, had to duck out right at the last minute due to a family issue. So we hope Bill will be back with us in a few weeks' time. Well, we know he'll be back with us in a few weeks' time. So, hope all goes well for you today, Bill. Well, let's start looking at our news stories. Well, the first one, I kind of like siblings in ham radio assist a road race. A 10 and a 14-year-old. What do you think, Leslie?
What do I think? I think it's a good thing, and the reason is that we all enjoy our hobby, and it's about giving back a little bit of public service. We do a similar thing with the beer festivals. We have radio operators, and it's good because they're learning about radio, but if something happens on that run and they've been tutored on the basics of voice procedure, then they're needed, and that's it's a good thing, and good luck to them as well. Congratulations on getting the license, because it's hard work and all good stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you totally, Leslie. Matt, you said that your daughter is 10, and you thought that she wouldn't be able to do this, or you were quite surprised at a 10-year-old having a license, weren't you?
Well, I guess I make the comment about my daughter is 10, my son is 8, and I don't think, even though I espouse the values of radio and explain my enthusiasm for all things electronic and scientific and blah, 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 I don't think I'm quite influencing my children in the right way. But, they're 10. I look at my kids, they're still young. They're young, right? And here I'm reading about an equally youthful pair, ages 14 and 10, who've got their licenses. They're on their path. I mean, their parents are also in the hobby, and that also helps. And I think we were talking before the recording about at what age do children kind of really understand the levels of detail and sort of responsibility of radio. But these young hams really seem to be stepping into the role. Again, it's a public event. It's the actually we haven't announced the Peachtree Road Race down in Atlanta, Georgia. 60,000 people are going to turn up for this 10K run, and something's going to happen with 60,000 people. It always does. Hopefully nothing serious, but having someone there with a radio, even a child, and I don't want to denigrate them for being young. I think being young is fantastic, but even someone with the radio is so powerful and so important in cases of emergency that having someone who knows how to use it, understands protocol on the radio, and understands how to switch it on and where to dial the frequencies and what have you, can save a life ultimately. And I think it's fantastic that they're stepping into that role.
I'm absolutely certain that they would have some guidance behind them. The parents behind them, just making sure they're doing things right. Yeah, they learn. I know people that pass the exam, and then you start to learn how to do things. It's not just about passing the exam; it's about getting there. It's about getting stuck in. So yeah, with a bit of guidance, with the parents in the background, I don't see a problem.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing. All in all, I think it's a really good thing. Edmund, your family are a little bit older, aren't they? So. Well, we won't rough them up for not having a license.
Yeah, they are a little bit older than that, but I was just casting my mind back to when I was 14, never mind 10, when I was 14. If it had been put to me that I could study and pass the foundation licence, even though at that stage the foundation licence as we know it today hadn't come into existence yet, I could study and pass that, then I could get involved with an event like this and take on potentially some quite hefty responsibilities if anything did happen at the event and I could handle it all in my stride. I think I would have probably gone a very funny colour and then made some excuse to my parents about, don't you think I've got enough schoolwork to be getting on with, or words to that effect. So serious respect to them for doing it, because if something does happen, I mean, I'm not talking like a major disaster or anything, but, a minor incident, then with that number of people all in a small geographical area, it's quite likely that the local cell phone tower will suddenly decide to stop working for everybody at once. So the asset that they have there of handheld radios could become very valuable.
Let me tell you a secret. I passed it was the B license at the time when I was about 15. They gave me the pass certificate, and the first thing I did was run away before they changed their mind because I couldn't believe I passed. So, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm a lightweight.
and then I learned how to do it properly. And then, it was a license to learn. And many, many years later, all those theories, which I passed by fluke, I don't mind admitting it, they all started to make sense. But that's only my own story.
Yeah. Well, I was chatting to one of the students that passed the other week, and we teach them to pass the exam. And this time he was asking questions. He said, "Well, you didn't tell me that on the course. You didn't tell me that on the course." I said, "No, we wanted you to pass the exam. We taught you the syllabus." Real radio, you'll be learning for the rest of your life. You never get off it that easy.
So true, Martin, so true.
It is, isn't it? So I think really good. Getting the youngsters in the hobby gives them something to do as well. And you're dead right. It might only be a minor incident, but a minor incident left untreated could cause big problems long term. So I think that's a really good one. Moving on to our next news story. Cuba achieves 96% pass rate in ham radio exams. Matt, what's your thoughts on this one?
Oh man, they have a fantastic teaching system, or it's a high pass rate basically. I mean, congratulations to them for getting these people through. I think I don't know what the UK pass rate is. We were trying to discuss that before, but just I guess in context, we talked a little bit about Cuba in the past. There's about 10,000 registered hams in Cuba of the different sort of full license or junior license kind of thing. But to achieve a continual growth in candidates, this last news article we were talking, they brought in about 300. 310 candidates were passed this year. And I looked back in some of the earlier years, there was like 500 or so in 2015, a similar number in 2016. So there's a continual growth in register. They must be doing something right. I think it's being an outsider. Okay, so I don't want to make generalizations about Cuba, but given their past about being self-sufficient, about being ostracized from the international community, they've had to deal with mending their own cars and doing things internally for a long time. I think that that mentality of self-sufficiency and learning and so forth is part of it. Kind of works well with our hobby of amateur radio. So maybe I'm not surprised that there are people who are doing well in the hobby and are finding the exams fairly straightforward because they have an interest in it. They have a can-do attitude. So I think it's great. But 90, 92, 93, 95% pass rates is remarkable. In fact, the rates in the article that I read, and I had to do a English translation of it. My Spanish is not that good. Suggests that the pass rate could have been higher because they had to discount some candidates because of criminal record. And I think locally they're not allowed to own a ham license if they have some sort of history like that. But I've never heard. I haven't worked a Cuban station before. I have heard them while I've been down in Spain. I guess a little lower latitude towards the Caribbean level, and I've heard them on the bands. But fantastic. And I expect we'll hear a lot more of them. The high power level of the Class 1 license is 2,000 watts, and it's all band. So just sit there and listen and see what comes out. I expect we'll hear more Cuban stations in the future. Well done.
Yeah, 2 kilowatts, guys. That's a serious cloud warmer, isn't it? What do you think, Edmund?
I think hell will freeze over before I ever run 2 kilowatts or anywhere near it. That's a phenomenally high pass rate for any exam, 96.9%. For the equivalent of the foundation. So I can only say congratulations to everybody who's been involved in achieving that. And I've never heard Cuba. I think my best DX ever has been, I'm not a DXer really, but best I've ever managed is Jamaica and Puerto Rico from memory.
Yeah, well, that's good enough, mate. It's good enough. You're on the map. Hi. Leslie, your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think the phrase that we were looking for was the knack. It's the way they put their cars together and repair them and keep them on the road. That's definitely the knack, and it's just carrying over to radio, to the radio amateur hobby. One thing I would say, though, is that to get that number of students through, it requires an awful lot of background work. Somebody has been doing a lot of work in the background. People don't see what goes on, but my guess is that somebody's been working, a group of people have been working very hard in the background to get these students through, and they should be congratulated for that.
Yeah, I agree with you because on that, because often if you've got teachers, and I know I've said this before on the podcast, but if you've got somebody who's teaching that's passionate about a subject, your students get excited and they want to hear about it and they want to know.
It's totally infectious, Martin.
Yeah.
It just, you get this buzz in the atmosphere, and then the time you're supposed to have like 2 hours on a lesson, and before you know it, the day's gone, and that's when you know you got it right.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I was very upset early on. I looked at doing my amateur radio license around about 1978, and the guy, you had to go to night school then, and the guy that was teaching it was just totally disinterested and just totally put me out of the hobby. Until later in life, I met somebody who was the complete opposite. So, but well done, guys. Well done.
So just before we end this topic, I had been, while you guys were talking, and I was listening, I found UK pass rates. So let's put it in context. Foundation, intermediate, and advanced pass rates from 2016, the latest number I could find. Foundation pass rate, anyone want to guess?
Around about 70%.
84.1%. Intermediate pass rate?
I'd say it's a bit lower.
95.2%.
Wow.
Yeah, the intermediate course is a really interesting course because they've got their license and you do some interesting practical stuff. And at that point in time, the intermediate course is probably the most fun of the current ones.
And then to round out the advanced pass rate?
I would think it would be a fair bit lower because, okay, I know that the intermediate has been reviewed or is about to be reviewed, one of those two, but at the time I did it, there was a big jump in difficulty between intermediate and full, far more so than there was between foundation and intermediate. So 70%?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There's a big drop in the pass rate. The 2016 number was 67.9%, and it was around the 65-70% level over the past 4 or 5 years before that, 2012, 2013 kind of thing. So you're absolutely right. The complexity of the full exam in the UK, but from intermediate it's a big jump, and the pass rate reflects that.
I think what they're trying to do at the moment is trying to not have such a big jump. I think that's hence the reason why the changes, but I've not gone into that on detail. So,
yeah, there was some talk a while back of them trying to get the amateur radio license recognised as in kind of a national qualification, like a BTEC exam, wasn't there? But that never come to fruition.
Yeah, God, that was quite some time back. Yeah, I do remember that, and there was all sorts of things on accreditation. But that's going. I mean, that was. Yeah, I do remember something along those lines, but I can't remember the details.
Yeah, well, I think we discussed this all night long, but they've done really well. Congratulations!
Absolutely,
to
thumbs
everybody
up.
Involved. Yeah. Moving on, this is kind of a little bit a request for guys. You guys to get out there and do some registration for JOTA, which is Jamboree on the Air, or JOTI, which is Jamboree on the Internet. 2018 is now starting to happen. So if you are going to help a scout troop, you need to start thinking about this. And guys, I should have looked up the date, and I'm sure one of the others is probably frantically looking it up now, but this happens every year. The scouts get together. They pass greeting messages with each other via amateur radio. But there are times when they can't work another amateur radio station run by scouts, and whereas they don't want to be sitting there calling CQ and HF or 2 meters and not working anybody. So, guys, if you're around that weekend, it's worth getting on the air and helping out. What do you think, Edmund?
Yes, this is a great event, really good fun, and it was only because I was celebrating a 40th birthday last year that I missed it. But every year before that, I've been involved in a number of different locations with a number of different scout groups. And I thoroughly echo what Martin's just said there. If you're not involved with the running of a station, keep an ear on the bands. And if you hear somebody calling CQ, even if you wouldn't normally work a special event station, or if you wouldn't normally go on 2 meters, turn a radio on and keep an ear out for somebody calling CQ. I think in previous episodes of the ICQ podcast, we've discussed this same subject, haven't we, Martin? And I've always got a few recommendations I can come out with. Do you want me to run through those again?
I don't see any reason why not.
Okay. If you're going to go along to one of these events, take with you quite a few PMR 446 handhelds, or the family radio service in the States, or the equivalent, and let the youngsters run riot with them, basically, so they get the used to using a proper radio with a proper push-to-talk button. Take along a Morse key and a buzzer. Take along a computer with Charlie M0PZT's Morse mouse program installed on it. Take along a copy of the Essex Ham Introduction to Amateur Radio video. Take along a 2-meter handheld and make sure that somebody who is there at the event with you can disappear, even if it's just into the field round the back of the scout hut, so that there will always be somebody for the scouts to exchange greetings messages with. Because, as Martin said, calling CQ repeatedly on an empty HF band can be a bit disheartening, but if you can get somebody who's very local on 2 meters FM, you not only will have a signal that is easier to copy for the youngsters, because copying SSB voice is a bit more of an art and something you build up from experience than listening to a nice, clean, rock solid FM signal on VHF. And get somebody to hide round the corner and work the people taking part in JOTA, but don't be too precise about exactly where you are. Because if you say I'm hiding in a field round the back of the scout hut, that could be disappointing to some people. If you just say, your QTH is, I don't know, Sutton and Cheam. I know where that is. I've been there once or twice, and then change the subject about location. Then the scouts will have the happiness and satisfaction of making a contact, and it won't have the edge taken off it by knowing that they're talking to somebody really, really local to them. But on top of that, if you hear any scout troop calling CQ on any band, even if you wouldn't normally, go back to them and work them, please. And if you take part in it, enjoy yourself. It is a great, great day. Great weekend, I should say. 3rd weekend in October.
Yeah.
And those are my recommendations.
Yeah, and I agree 100% with them, having done it a number of years with the Sutton and Sheen Club and 7th Banstead Scouts. Not sure they're doing it this year, but it's good fun. Leslie, you ever been involved with this?
Well, Gilwell Park is just down the road from me. I don't get involved in that side of things, but like I said, I can feel the RF coming from Gilwell Park when it all fires up. So. Couple of other things. I totally agree with your point about giving them 446 handhelds. Let them run wide with them. It doesn't matter. They're low power, not going to cause any interference. They're going to be absolutely fine. And it gives them experience of getting on the air. Great stuff.
Yeah, and gets over the mic shy bit as well. So at least they know how to use any radio if they had to in an emergency situation, if they've done the 446. Matt, what's your feelings?
Well, I'm going to put that date in my calendar, the 19th to the 21st of October. If there's any fun activity on HF, I will dial in. And to be honest, given my my interest in UHF VHF, my slowly growing interest, I should say, then maybe I'll take advantage of that too. And if I hear them calling CQ on that very quiet band, then I'll participate as well. Absolutely.
You might even find, Matt, if you're out in Spain, that you can also, have a go out in Spain, because it is a worldwide event that happens on that weekend.
Yeah. I haven't tried working out using my CPT authorization in Spain yet. When I go out there, I'm a little bit busy. I haven't seen the family for a while, so I play dad. But I'll see what I can do. I should take more interest in the portability of UHF VHF and small HF rig. I should try to make a bit of time, but it's a little hard when I go out there, because it's not, I go there once a week every month, so it's a bit of a challenge.
Go and do dad things, Matt. It's important. So moving on, the BBC put out a headline that quite shocked us at first. It said,
"We're doomed. We're doomed."
Yeah, we're doomed, Leslie. It says shortwave radio listeners continue its steep decline, and then, which we all knew was happening, and then they talk about the World Service and all their other bits and pieces. But suddenly look at it and you think, hang on a minute, the BBC getting the information out to people has grown phenomenally, hasn't it, Leslie?
Yes, it has. All that's really changing is the way it's being done. I mean, I'll give you a little example. I've got a little Kindle here with an app for radios, and when I instead of having the old little medium wave radio in the corner, I have one of these apps, and I download the radio from that way. The content's the same, just the method has changed. And I just think that the headlines were a bit pessimistic, because things change, guys. That's the way of the universe.
It certainly is. And you now get these internet-connected speakers, and I'm not going to mention her name. And even if you guys shout, I've got headphones on so she won't hear you. But I ask her to play BBC Radio 4 in the mornings. And while I'm getting my breakfast and getting things done and get the news. So we do consume audio and news from different media. Matthew, what's your thoughts?
Well, yeah, the again, just before recording, we discussed the story, and the headline was, BBC World Service shortwave listening is declining, significantly. And I guess the interpretation was something's wrong with the BBC World Service. In fact, following their global audience measure survey, which is looking at how everyone is consuming their services, the numbers are astronomical. There's been an increase in the global audience for the BBC World Service by 10 million listeners to 279 million listeners weekly. That's an enormous reach, right? And if you take the full audience of all the other services that BBC can provide outside the UK, television services and online things, it's almost another 100 million. It's what, 347 million people are counted as relying on that service. And that is up, again, another million from previous surveys. So all that's really happening here is the mode of consumption of that data, of that information. The BBC is still being listened to, is still being turned to all around the world. They're just not using the radio. They're using more modern, cleaner, more effective modes, whether that's internet or podcasts or other things. No surprise, right? Because they're not necessarily listening to this service because they're shortwave listeners because they want to use radio. They want to hear the content and the messaging and practice their English or have it in a local language. And the means then for them to consume that is not as important. So as technology changes and the rest of the world gets connected to the internet and has more, the cost of these technologies are coming down with cell phones becoming much easier and cheaper. Data rates are coming down. No surprise. But what's really heartening is the fact that the BBC World Service is still growing in demand, is still being perceived as a message service of importance globally.
Yeah. The BBC moved over the other week and now have a head of podcasting, which I thought was quite good. And if you think about it, the BBC, by putting information out on the internet, they're no longer having to have the real estate, the high-powered transmitters, all the cost of producing the content and sending it. In actual fact, it's the consumer that's paying the cost now. So we're paying for this in our mobile phone plans because or our internet connections. So it's quite an interesting one where in the old days radio was free. If you had a radio, you had to pay a licence fee in the UK, but pretty much outside the UK it was free and you could hear it. Now you're actually paying for it in your data plan. So I think it's an interesting one. Edmund, you're more of a analog radio man, aren't you?
Yes, I'm a Luddite. And I suppose, rather flippantly, I could say maybe if shortwave listening is on the decline, the fact that so many international broadcasters have ceased transmission on shortwave might have something to do with it. I mean, I remember in the early 90s, long before I got a license, I listened to shortwave broadcast, and I could tune across the 49, 41 and 31 meter bands, and there would just be wall-to-wall stations, whereas now you can do it, and there are huge gaps between stations, and most of the transmissions that you can hear seem to be coming from China Radio International. So they clearly haven't feel there's a value in it and haven't switched off all their transmitters. So yes, fine, put everything online by all means and stream it over people's Wi-Fi connections and over 3G, 4G mobile phone connections, and all of that is brilliant until it stops working.
Yeah.
And I'm always a little bit not worried exactly. It doesn't sit easy with me to say, yeah, it's fine, we'll stick everything online and that's all right then. And there's no plan B, nothing to fall back on. Because I know we say that shortwave is expensive, but I bought a spool of wire from a car boot sale for about £3, strung it along the top of my fence, close to the ground, so near vertical incident skywave, and I had comms over most of Europe on 80 and 60 metres running off battery power. So shortwave broadcasting, yeah, okay, it's not directly comparable, but if push came to shove, it's not necessarily that expensive compared to the alternative. So yes, progress, wonderful.
Yeah. Well, I don't have a problem with you being a Luddite. In fact, I think you're right. You've hit the nail on the head. We're all moving forward, and people don't care. The problem is those that don't know don't care, and there are content creators and there are content consumers. And fortunately, there are more consumers in the world than there are creators, and they just want good quality at their desk, bang, or at their house. They don't care how it comes there. I mean, I'm having a serious discussion with my local builder regarding power line devices at the moment. He came round and asked me whether he should get them, and I nearly Fruit Looped, but it's because people don't understand. But anyway, it's a shame, but it's nice to see that the information's getting out there. Moving on. We don't often hear this, and as Leslie said to me at the pre-discussion, well, you throw enough power at it, of course it's going to work. But broadcast stations were being heard on 88 megs across the Atlantic into Ireland a few weeks ago. So, I still think that's a good bit of propagation, a good bit of sporadic E. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I actually went to the website to have a listen to the recording. So this was a Canadian station. To be honest, I read the story. I didn't know what I was expecting. 88.5 megs. That's FM, right? That's broadcast. Yes. Yes. Listen to it. And it's the recording. Sure, it's a heavily QSB, sort of QRM kind of sounding recording. But it's there. It's definitely something there. But I wouldn't If it was like an HF conversation, it was a QSO conversation, I wouldn't be able to copy the call or anything like that, I think. But it's kind of interesting. Again, another part of the hobby, right? Listening. So this is not about transmitting. This is about shortwave listening, detecting FM DX, or participating in FM DX chasing, if you like. If I was tuning through the shortwave dials, I would hear that, or it's not actually this. It's, of course, that's on the FM dials, but I'd hear that kind of garbage. I wouldn't be able to engage with it. I couldn't listen to it. I'd move on. But it's interesting to find people who can understand where that should be coming from. They have an awareness maybe from other means. Maybe there was a station ident that they could pick out, and they put it down in their logbook. It's an interesting part of our hobby where you can within the very narrow confines, you're saying I'm only going to listen to FM globally and see what I can pick up, and really pick out these weak signals. I was trying to understand what kind of listening station or what kind of antenna was being used here to pick it up. It was a long whip or something special. I don't know.
A big one.
A big one. Yeah, a lot of metal in the sky. Yeah, exactly. And they always seem to have success in Ireland. The Irish stations always seem to be doing new world records at something. So it's kind of nice that I guess it's the same, like you worked all squares in a country, worked all Britain or whatever it might be. You kind of define a perimeter around your hobby. Say, I'm only going to constrain myself to do this and enjoy my hobby within these boundaries. And then you enjoy the competition or the chase of trying to find all the the squares or the stations that you can copy. So it's really it takes me back a little bit to my old shortwave days when I was a teenager, and I looking at my QSL cards from way back when, the Vatican radio and various bits and pieces. It's nice, a bit of a memory lane thing, but fascinating that people can leverage the hobby in this way. Wonderful.
Yeah. Edmund, you're a real radio man. This must excite you a bit.
This is absolutely remarkable because so many disparate elements all had to come together at the same time for this to happen. First of all, it's not just single hop sporadic E, it's double hop, as I understand it, assuming, of course, that no other propagation modes are involved as well. And you only need to listen to sporadic E on band 2 on the FM broadcast band, or even on the OIRT broadcast band from Eastern Europe down between 68 and 74 megs, to hear how quickly the signals will come up to 5 and 9 and then disappear 10 seconds later into nothing. As we know, sporadic E can be very fast moving and very localized. So first of all, you need the sporadic E clouds to be in exactly the right place, not just one, but 2 of them, if not more than 2 of them. Secondly, you need somebody to be sitting in front of their radio at exactly the right moment that those clouds are in the right place. Thirdly, you need them to be listening to a frequency where they can hear a station from Canada. That frequency needs to be clear at their QTH, and by some miracle, 88.5 in his particular location is completely clear channel. If you listen to the recording, that frequency falls in the BBC Radio 2 subband, which goes from 88 to 90.1 megahertz. And there are strong transmissions from Radio 2, a couple of 100 kilohertz either side. If you look in the video that appears on the website, there's really strong signals you can see immediately adjacent to the DX signal. Those are transmissions from different Radio 2 sites elsewhere in Northern Ireland. So if the station that he was receiving had happened to be broadcast on a slightly different frequency, then it could well have been stamped on and he wouldn't have heard it at all. And even if 88.5 is normally clear in that QTH, over the last couple of weeks, we've had an awful lot of tropospheric ducting around Europe. So it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that that frequency could have been occupied by a station that wouldn't normally be there, but that was coming in by tropo. So all of those elements all had to come together at exactly the same time. And not only that, he recorded it as well. Not that I would have disbelieved him if he hadn't recorded it, but the fact he's got a recording of it is the icing on the cake. And at times, that signal was almost strong enough as it was fading in and out to support stereo, because the stereo difference component of the signal is, 3-4 decibels down relative to the mono sound left and right element of it. So for all of those things to come together, he can put that on his gravestone, basically. That is it. In terms of Band 2 FM DXing, that is it. To get all of those things and to pull that one off, that is utterly remarkable. And if I ever come close to anything like that, I will be very, very happy. Well done. Yeah.
Well, Leslie, we were discussing that you could probably do it with a lot of power. That Edmund's rather put us in his place, hasn't we?
Well, I think Edmund described it perfectly, to be honest. When you look at the things that have got to fall in place, yeah, it was a bit of a tongue-in-cheek comment from me. Yeah, you need a lot of power to do something like that. But yeah, Edmund described it perfectly.
Yeah, thanks to Edmund for putting that in perspective, as you say, to really underline this is such a rare and to be recorded as well. It's phenomenal.
It's just jealousy, really, because the best I've ever managed on that band is Morocco.
Oh, that's still good. We applaud that. They're well done. Well done.
And conversely, despite the fact that technology has moved on these days, it's actually harder to do that on paper now than it would have been, say, 25 years ago, because 25 years ago, there were large swathes of the FM broadcast band that didn't have FM broadcasts in them. Prior to 1992, when Classic FM launched, and I still find it unbelievable that it took until 1992 in this country before we got our first independent national radio station. We only had independent local radio up till then. Before Classic FM launched, the gap between 100 and 102 was completely free of FM broadcast stations. After the emergency services moved out of that sub-band, there was nothing above 105 to 108, because the Radio Authority, as was, hadn't decided what kind of services it wanted to license there at that stage. So these days, with the exception of the 500 kilohertz between 87.5 and 88, which is not routinely used for broadcasting in the UK, unless you can twig something in there, then any rare DX that comes in stands a very good chance of being stamped on and inaudible by a local broadcast station in England.
Yeah, well, that's a good one. And Morocco, I'll give you 10 out of 10 for that one. That's further than I've got on listening on the broadcast bands. Moving on to our last news story, and the cave rescues down in Thailand of the school children, the football team caught in the caves, has concluded with in success, and the guys got out. That's really, really good, and we're really pleased about this. But as a sub-note to it, they used a technology that a UK radio amateur, Mr. John Hay, G0CIB, who's now unfortunately a silent key, developed for, underground radio. Leslie, do you want to go first on this one?
Well, I was thinking about this. I was scratching my head, and I was sure, the discussion before we came on air, I was sure there was an article in Radcom, and somebody, I believe it, one of yourselves said it was in the 2002 edition, January 2002. I believe it was yourself, Matt?
Yeah, I just found the PDF there. Yeah.
Yeah. So we got the PDF, and I thought, yes, that's it. Well, what can you say? I mean, technology. This was radio amateurs at its best, experimenting. And then many, many years later, they're becoming very, very useful. This type of kit isn't available on the market. It can only be sort of specially built to do the job. I think it works on 87 kilohertz, which is LF, and is US. It's on upper sideband. Now I did follow the links, and he's got some instruction manuals on the use of the kit, technical specifications, PCB layouts. So if anybody's interested, I really would recommend having a look at these links. And I see a bit of a resurgence in this subject. I'm just trying to remember, somebody asked me quite some time back about how RF signals travel through different types of materials. When obviously this one's, essentially through rock. What is the attenuation going through, say, concrete or all sorts of different materials, and that has an implication for the communications we use daily. So there's an opportunity for a bit of research, I think, in that. But what do you think, Martin?
I think it's an interesting technology developed by an amateur that has proved over the years to be very successful. And when we were talking earlier, and we were saying the range on it's about 800 meters. Well, that's nearly half a mile through rock and earth down into a cave. That's quite impressive. Matt, what do you think?
I have to admit, I hadn't heard about the Hay phone, or I really even considered what the challenges of communicating underground. I mean, yeah, you go potholing or caving. I guess I had some idea that you use a handheld, right? You kind of short distance stuff, and it's been a tough news article about the recent Thai cave. People that were trapped underground, and it was very tense. And we were all, I think, globally, we were watching the news to see how it would be resolved. And it's just nice to understand that some part of it, maybe an important part, I don't really know the details of the actual cave dive itself, relied upon amateur radio. And this the Silent Creed John Hay clearly was motivated to share his knowledge for the benefit and safety of others. I think it's probably saved a number of lives in the past, and I think it's one of those unsung heroes that we can recognize in our hobby because we talk about our hobby, but I don't think it got a lot of press in the global newspapers. I didn't see this information being emphasized. I would have picked it up earlier.
Yeah, I think the interesting part of that is that the general public wouldn't have been aware it was amateur radio that had produced this. It's a bit like you have devices in all walks of life, and you don't necessarily think about who invented them, why they were put together, and all those sort of things. But from our point of view, I think it's a very interesting thing. Edmund, what's your thoughts on this one?
I have read an article on cave radio more recently than the Radcom article referred to a moment ago. I don't really remember an awful lot about it other than it mentioned that handhelds wouldn't work unless it was a very, very close range and unobstructed line of sight. So if you were in a long straight tunnel and you could see each other, then yes, a handheld might work. But other than that, it wouldn't. I seem to remember that you can do it on 7 megs, 40 meters in certain circumstances. But the real cutting edge technology here, well, I say cutting edge, the technology's been around a long time. The real effective way to do it, by the sounds of it, is using low frequency, so 87 kilohertz in this case. And it boggles my mind, the science behind it and the way that it works. And obviously I'm sure that John Hay, if he was still alive, would hope that his technology would never need to be used, as I'm sure we would all hope it would never need to be used and people would never need to be rescued. But I just think it's a little bit of a shame that he died relatively recently, didn't he? 2016. So he didn't live quite long enough to see this rescue in Thailand come to pass, because if he'd still been alive, I'm sure he would have quite rightly considered that his crowning glory with the system that he helped to develop. So I'm sorry you missed it by just a couple of years, but it's wonderful they got everybody out alive, and especially, of course, must go to the cave diver who lost his life attempting to rescue everybody else.
Absolutely. With the cave diver, our thoughts go to the family, obviously. Well, that ends the news stories. And now we need to find out what everybody's been up to, radio-wise, around the table. Now, Leslie, radio-wise, not floating cranberries, cream eggs in lemonade, right?
Would I do that? No, we've had our annual camp of the Silverthorne Radio Club. As you probably gather on the postings on Facebook that we've put on, we had a great time. Radio was, I started on HF, and we had about a day and a half where I was just bashing my head against a brick wall and couldn't work anything at all. Then we had a barbecue and the usual things. And then I think it was Sunday evening, everything picked up again, and then we sort of worked about sort of 24 stations in a row on 7 megs. See where they are on the old cluster, and they just bang one after the other. So it was great fun. Anyone that wants to see what we were doing, just pop onto Facebook, Silverthorne Radio Club, and you can see what a great time we had. But that's what I've been doing.
Yeah, I looked at what you were up to and thought you guys were having a lot of fun. I watched what was going on Facebook, and maybe one year I'll come over and antagonise you.
Please do, Martin.
Yeah. Matthew, what have you been up to since? Oh, it's only 2 weeks for you.
What have I done? Well, I as I hinted, or maybe on this podcast a bit earlier, I'm kind of growing in my appreciation of VHF, UHF. I've got a rig. I'm going to start playing with it. I had a great time a couple months ago at a local small contest, the Practical Wireless Magazine contest. Was it 5 watts? I loved that. I thought that's it's a nice time to have some playtime with SSB and so forth. So I'm kind of thinking, can I make this a habit? I don't have a Yagi antenna myself, so I'm thinking about making one, playing with one, maybe working some satellites. I know something you're very fond of doing, and I'm actually going to try and build my own antenna rotator. That's my latest little project, so that it'll be very homemade. Indeed, and sort of portable, temporary functionality, but it's going to be based around a car windscreen wiper motor. I've discovered these little things. Seems to be ideal to have a rotator which has forward and reverse direction. It's got speed control and so forth. So I'm putting together a little plan to build that, a little bit of a project. And I suppose radio related, I have applied formally beyond the Royal Navy's Amateur Radio Society's membership. I'm going full whack into the Imperial War Museum volunteer section for warship conservation radio section team to be able to take more time and be more active on HMS Belfast in the center of London here, and basically join you guys in all the public engagements. And keeping that Bridge Wireless office active.
Right, we're up there in a couple of weeks' time, so that'll be good fun, Matt.
Yeah, I look forward to it. We'll just do more of the same.
Yeah. Well, as I say, and maybe you'll end up with... Everybody else seems to have a different warship conservation badge to me. Mine seems to be a red one, and everybody else is either blue or greeny blue. And I do wonder whether mine's been signalled out as a troublemaker. Never mind. Edmund, what have you been up to radio-wise?
Well, following the last episode of this, I decided I would have a go at network radio, because even though, in my humble opinion, it's not real amateur radio, quote unquote, whatever that is, it doesn't mean it's valueless and without merit as well. So I downloaded the app onto my iPhone, my elderly iPhone 5S, and I spoke to one person so far. Guess who that is?
I've no idea, mate, but there was a long message came through on my phone one night.
Yeah, so I worked in inverted commas, Martin M1 MRB over my Wi-Fi connection, so there was RF involved.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all jesting aside, I've had Tim call me, one of the guys at the club, one Friday morning he called me. And it's quite strange, you know, you're sitting at your desk and suddenly your phone acts as a walkie-talkie and it comes through. I also had Chris Howard ring me from the States this week on Zello, so it does work.
Yeah, it's fun, isn't it? I wouldn't replace any of my proper, in inverted commas, radios with it, but there's a fun little thing to have. It's a nice extra string to the amateur radio bow, isn't it?
Certainly is. Well, I'm doing a talk at Sutton and Cheam this week regarding network radio, and it's an introduction to show people at the club what it is, but I've kind of broadened it a bit more than the current PTT type apps, and just giving an overview of what's been around, what's the history build up to all this, and kind of just opening up for discussion rather than a presentation. This is going to be a discussion, and at the end of it, there is a Sutton and Cheam channel now, which Chris is the moderator on, which we set up for the club, and that works quite well. There are a few people in the club, and I'm sure on Thursday night there'll be far more that'll get their smartphones on. So that's network radio's fun, Edmund.
Yeah, so I might do that a bit more. And also my experience of HF has been similar to what's been already mentioned. Sometimes Interg has been there on 40 metres, but there have been other times when I've just scanned across all the HF bands and they are completely devoid of any signals at all, including FT8, which is pretty serious when conditions deteriorate to that extent. So I've been hiding myself away on VHF, nothing unusual there. And here in the UK, we've been going through rather an extended period of hot weather and high pressure. But the pressure has, in my QTH anyway, not been constant. It has tended to drop and then go up and drop and go up a bit. So often you'll find when you've had a period of settled high pressure, if it suddenly drops, then you can well find tropospheric openings on 2 metres. And there have been some very nice ones. So I've basically been working quite a few stations all along the North French coast and into Belgium on 2 metres FM and practicing my French a little bit. But apart from that, there's not really anything else much that I've been doing. Oh, and talking about foreign languages and going back to JOTA and JOTI that we were talking about earlier, if you hear any scout groups on the air on that weekend in October from a foreign country, if you can go back to them in their own language, even if it's only 3 or 4 words, they will love you forever.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah, I agree with you, mate. No problems at all on that one. So sounds like you've all been having fun. Well, I spent a bit of time with Lawrence, my new licensed M6, the other day, and we were telling him things that weren't in the syllabus, and he was like, "Oh, you didn't tell me that." I said, "That's what radio's about. You now one of us. You're now going to start learning." So that was good. Did have quite a few contacts on UHF. I've been chatting on UHF and VHF a fair bit from the car, and I took a UHF transceiver up to the club on Monday night, and we were doing a bit of UHF FM, which was fun. Mentioned the club talk, the shack that I'm decorating at the moment, or the room that's been completely gutted, is well underway to being completed now, so that's looking good. And the only bit of hardware fixing I did is I had to fix my PTT switch in the car. I made a hands-free unit with a PTT switch on the gear stick, and the switch died. Really strange the other week the switch died, so I just had to fit a new switch. Not sure of the parentage of the switch, whether it was an old one or a new one when I fitted it about 18 months ago. But new switch and everything's happy. So that's what I've been up to. And looks like all of us have been fairly busy. So I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me tonight. I'd like to thank Mr. Leslie Butterfield G0CIB.
It's been a blast, Martin, as usual.
Yeah, and you still didn't tell us about that egg. Okay. I'd like to thank Mr. Edmund Spicer, M0MMG.
Thanks for having me on, Martin. It's been fun as always.
Yeah, great to have you, Edmund, obviously. And Mr. Matthew Nassau, M0NJX. Great to have you with us again, Matt.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. I've had a wonderful time.
Yeah, it's been fun. The only downside to this whole episode is, unfortunately, Bill got called away at the last minute. But Mr. Bill Barnes, N3JIX, will be back with us soon, though. So I'll say 73s to you all, and we'll do it all again soon. 73.
Cheerio.
73.
73.
The ICQ Amateur Ham Radio Podcast, serving the amateur ham radio community fortnightly since 2008.
Now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. And I'm very grateful for the listeners who sent in this episode's News in Brief features. If you'd like to have your news story considered, just go along to the ICQ podcast website, click on the Contact Us page, and send us your information. So Phil, VK6 Alpha Delta Foxtrot is the first one to drop us a line. He says, we may have heard about it already, but if not, it'd be great to let people know that recently 3 stations in Europe were heard from Perth, Western Australia on 6 metre FT8 by Andy VK6 Oscar X-Ray. An extract from the local logger he sent us. And it looks like 2 were working in Japan when one was calling CQ. Word got around, and all of a sudden 6 metres was humming the next day with FT8 signals. It also looks like as well from the log supplied by VK8 Mike Sierra that 3 stations were worked on FT8 on 6 metres, and there also others had listened as well. So as I say, it looks like more news about the popularity of FT8, and certainly on terms of distances that that signal is covering from there. I think what probably is most noticeable is Phil tells us that normally the 6 metre season is during the Australian summer, November to March, but there are short openings throughout the winter season. So it's very interesting there that during winter in Australia that 6 metres on FT8 got through. Marek Petrov, Oscar Kilo 1 Bravo India Lima drops the line. This could be very interesting, not only for the website he says affected, but obviously for other amateur radio products that might be using this. He suggests that Google has started charging not-for-profit websites for using the Google Maps API interface. And this is going to be affecting services including PSK Reporter, APRS.fi, WhisperNet, and many more along those lines. So this could certainly, cause issues with small projects, etc., getting off the ground, and may be required to start looking at alternatives for those services. So certainly worthwhile letting us know there, Marek, and we'll certainly have to pass it on to the amateur radio community. Now, you may have also enjoyed our video from Ham Radio 2018 in relation to the Kenwood TS890S and our interview by Chris, Mike 0TCH, with Mark Haynes from Kenwood, UK. Well, news now has come out that the first pricing has been announced of that, and say this is for the 6 and 4 metre base transceiver. It should be available in time for Newark Hamfest in the UK, which is the end of September, and it looks like that the selling price is going to be around about £5,000 sterling. Pre-orders are being taken by some UK dealers, so contact your dealer of choice if you wish to get on the list of getting yours ready, as I say, for their pre-ship. If not, Mark was telling us from Kenwood that if you'd like to have another look in the UK of the rig, it certainly intends to be on display at Hamfest, as I say, in Newark at the end of September. Well, now we head over to our features episode, which is a review and roundup of the World Radio Team Championship by Ed Durant, DD5 Lima Papa. I hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
A look back on WRTC 2018 in Wittenberg, Germany. Think of an event organised by a small group of hams that is a world championship with 124 contestants, 300 plus volunteers and a small management team that costs €500,000 to put on, needs 4 years' work and negotiations with 3 regional governments, and you have the World Radiosport Team Championships, or the Olympics of Radio Contesters as some know it. I was very happy to offer my support as a volunteer and was allocated to the media team in the heart of the organisation. What I saw in my position was an amazingly well organised, highly motivated, skilled and effective organisation of which any large company in the world would be happy to have. And these are all unpaid workers doing it for the love of the hobby. Contestants, referees and the majority of the volunteers arrived on the Wednesday, and there were various meetings and events arranged over the next couple of days until on Friday the contestants saw their sights for the first time before returning on Saturday for the contest itself. The WRTC Championship coincides with the IARU HF contest, and apart from 160 metres, takes place on the same bands, but with only 100 watts output to completely identical antenna systems on identical locations as far as ground geography is concerned, around the Wittenberg-Jessen area in the eastern part of Germany. The organisers had another surprise up their sleeves to make sure there would be enough stations calling the championship stations. They got a very special range of call signs allocated from BNetza, the National Licensing Authority, and they were call signs starting with Y8, Yankee 8, call sign letters that belonged to the old East Germany and were stopped 28 years ago. While the BNetza has this range available, they issued the required 63 short call signs, but only to be used for the 24 hours of the contest. That adds a special reason for amateurs from around the world to call the WRTC stations, as it's quite possible that these call sign prefixes will never be used again. As well as the principle of a level playing field, another principle is to promote technical innovation. While all stations use the same antennas, they bring their own transceivers, and it was interesting to see how the newest transceiver models performed, what had improved over the last 4 years, or will the oldies but goldies outperform the new on-the-market models? Linked to the championships, there were regular daily video reports, as well as text and picture press releases. The opening and closing ceremonies were live-streamed to the internet, and during the competition, the biggest hot item for the spectators was the online, real-time scoreboard, where on a minute-by-minute basis, everyone apart from the contesters, as they are not allowed any internet access, could watch how each of the teams were doing, as well as the materials and internet broadcasts produced by the WRTC media team. Radio DARC, a group linked to the National Radio Society, put out 2 special radio shows on shortwave AM, using a pair of 300 kilowatt transmitters from the ORS company near Vienna, Austria. One in English on the Saturday covering Europe and North America, and one for Europe in German on the Sunday. However, everything almost didn't go to plan. The 20 dB gain curtain antenna used with one of the 2 300 kilowatt transmitters to put out 30 megawatts of EIRP into the US was damaged in the week coming up to the WRTC. The professional teams worked long hours to try to repair their damage, and the transmitter site manager, who just happens to be a ham, called in 2 local hams to help out, and on Friday evening the antenna was fixed and working. A case of both ORS and the Vienna amateur community putting in extra effort to make sure everything went without problems with the WRTC. Back in the organisations centre, problems were logged in a ticket system and efficiently resolved. Such interesting calls came in as one, obviously rather large operator, kept breaking chairs and had to have them replaced, in the end with a heavy-duty one. On one site, the portaloo was blown over and was unable to be righted, so a backup was sent. A couple of antennas were damaged prior to the start of the contest and replaced from the spares. Overall, for such a large and complex event, everything ran very well. It was great to be at the HQ Hotel, where everyone was approachable, the top contesters, the representatives from the large ham radio companies and the organisers. Everyone was working hard but happy to talk during the days before and after the actual contest. A very friendly community indeed. So, you're all waiting to hear who won. The first, second and third places in the overall categories, there are also log accuracy, mainly SSB, mainly CW and youth categories as well, where, with a record-breaking score, despite the fact they were in the bottom of the solar cycle, the Lithuanian team of Gedas, LY9A, and Mindis, LY4L, using the call sign Y81N, with almost 5.7 million points. Second place with the German team of Manfred, DJ5MW, and Stefan, DL1IAO, using the call sign of Y81A and almost 5.3 million points. And third went to the reigning champions from 2014, Dan, N6MJ, and Chris, KL9A, using the call sign of YH2V, and accrued almost 4.9 million points. The Lithuanian team were not using an SDR, rather two top-of-the-range Yaesu FTDX 5000 transceivers, which use down conversion technology. So perhaps the SDR rigs haven't taken over the contest world yet. Your reporter was lucky enough to be outside the tent of the winning team right after the completion of the 24-hour no-break competition. So, what did the LYs say was the secret of their success? It seems practice, practice, practice is the answer. They also mentioned their respect for the organisation and especially the volunteers at WRTC 2018 in the following short audio clip.
It was, it was the preparations were 2 years of qualification, qualifying. It's also preparation for the contest for WRTC, sure. The equipment also was bought, and maybe more special things were training with Morse Runner. Every day, almost every day, for me it took half a year, and it was every day sitting by Morse Runner and listening. So it's
we took
got
many
us
contests together. We were not working for the results in all those contests like CQ Worldwide, CQ Mir, the Russian DX contest, but we just tried to work together to improve our communication between we don't need to shout each other and so on. So this is.
But you actually competed together in 2014, correct? Is it the same pair, or have I got that wrong?
Yeah.
So it's a continuing process all the time,
and it's very hard now.
Yeah, and a more general thing, have you actually had a chance at all to see Wittenberg, the town of Wittenberg?
I don't think so.
No, okay.
if not the WRTC, because we were walking and we will continue.
We have a plan.
Yeah, for the Monday we have for the Monday. Yeah, also.
Okay.
But if there would be no WRTC would not take place in this area, then I doubt that we would come here.
It's a beautiful area.
Maybe.
Yeah. Okay.
Who knows, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me just ask you one question again, because it didn't come up here. Your impression of the organisation and the volunteers. You're very happy with that?
We are very happy. Yeah. At least me, I'm very happy about everything. The playing field is clear, it's almost equal, or as we can see, it's absolutely equal for all participants. It's hard to find such a place. Volunteers, they were all the time here, and if we call something, it's okay. We owe them a lot. I don't know, maybe we'll be able to pay back somehow, but not today, of course.
Hey, it's amateur radio. We help each other.
Amateur radio.
Yeah.
We are smart, and we'll think about it.
So thank you very, very much for taking the time.
Thank you very much.
Let me apologise for the quality of that recording, but I think hopefully you could understand the gist of what was being said, and it was a very special moment in a rather windy field, and quality of audio there was not what we'd like, but hopefully you could understand it all. You know, without aiming to do so, the WRTC teams have proved something that many DXers won't believe. The 63 teams all made more contacts than the winners of the first few WRTC events back in the last century. The top 10 finishers got more contacts and hence points than the winning team at the event 4 years ago in Boston in 2014, when we were still pretty close to the top of the solar cycle. We're now at the bottom of the cycle, and they're getting even more contacts, and that's with 100 watts and wire antennas at a relatively low height of 18 meters. The contacts are out there if people want to make them and listen. Okay, one of the wire antennas was a spider beam hex beam, which is like a 2-element beam on 20 meters through 10 meters and a dipole on 40 meters. But these are definitely not your stacked multi-element single-band beam arrays at 100 meters in the sky with 1, 2 or 3 kilowatts amplifier feeding it. Often when I'm on a mountain trying to get contacts for JOTA and there is a contest on, I get trodden on by high-powered contest stations or their splatter. But just look what can be achieved by running only 100 watts, less QRM, and adherence to license conditions. After all, the amateur radio regulations stipulate only use as much power as needed to make the contact. It doesn't say run as much power as you can, splatter all over the bands and stomp on the low power stations. Don't get me wrong, I'm not against contesting in general, only bad contesters, and one thing that's proved to me from the WRTC this year is the top contesters are the good contesters, and in such a contest they're actually controlled by referees, one to each team, so that they do behave their best. But I think these people are the cream of the crop and wouldn't give a problem. It's some of the others that give contesting a bad name. So, what does your reporter think personally of the WRTC, and what can be made better in WRTC 2022 in Bologna, Italy? The German WRTC had fantastic organisation and was a friendly, professional event which received local and national press and TV coverage, which can only be good for the hobby. What would I change? I'd like to see the number of teams increased from 63 to 100 to allow representation of amateurs from Asia. Japan especially is a large radio contesting nation, but there was only one team with one Japanese and one US operator in it, in Wittenberg. There should be a lot more. Of course, I'd also like to have seen an Aussie team, as well as the Kiwi one, representing Australasia. I'd like to see teams that qualify for a particular region only have 2 operators from that region, not only that the team leader comes from that region, which seems to be the case in some of the teams. Currently, only the winning team gets automatically invited to the next WRTC. I think having the top 3 be invited would make the race for gold, silver and bronze more interesting. So, it now only remains for me to wish those planning to compete in WRTC 2022 all the best, and remember, practice, practice, practice. And of course, I congratulate all teams that took part in WRTC 2018. Even to qualify to this event is a great achievement. Thanks to the WRTC 2018 organisers for letting me be a small part of this great event. 73, this is Ed, DD5LP.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Well, thank you there to Ed Durant, DD5 Lima Papa there, for his feature on the WRTC 2018 contest. So hopefully, guys, you got a great flavour of the event there from Ed, and say thanks again for doing that for us all. Well, we'd dip into our mailbag now. We've got a piece of mail here from Elliot Mansfield, who's a shortwave listener. And he just drops us a quick message going, "Hi, I got into network radio's following the interview on the podcast. It's pretty good. Non-licensed people like me can chat with hams." And he ended up having a chat with the guy we interviewed. That was G3 Zulu Hotel India, who was Ian Abel there, who Dad interviewed there a couple of, or last episode back there. So certainly, I'd say it's a good way of, again, bringing more and more people into the hobby, Dad, isn't there? If Elliot, as a shortwave listener, is now talking to hams and find out more and more about the hobby, isn't that another great benefit of potentially new network radio solution?
Certainly is, Colin. And I've known Elliot probably about 10, 12 years. And Elliot's, I'm sorry, Elliot, I'm going to tell him the truth. You're a very, very clever IT consultant, and very, very clever on lots of other things. And I'm sure if Elliot put his mind to it, he could do all 3 exams in about 3 months, no problems. However, I know you do a lot of other things, but you've been a long-term listener to the podcast, and also, it's something that quite excited you, so that's good. And hopefully we'll catch up with you sometime, Elliot, at a rally. As I say, Elliot and I used to work together about 10 years ago, so say thanks for that, Elliot. Nice piece of feedback.
Yeah, thanks a lot now. Well, again, as always, you can get in touch with us by visiting the ICQpodcast.com webpage, click on Contact Us, and drop us a line. You can also keep in touch with us on the Facebook group. You can also do via our LinkedIn profiles and also our Twitter handles at M1MRB and at Colin Butler on Twitter. And now we just need to do the last thank yous here. So let's thank our guys joined you on the news table: Leslie G0 Charlie India Bravo, Edmund Mike 0 Mike November Golf, and Matthew Mike 0 November Juliet X-Ray. Thanks a lot for taking part there. Make sure you head over to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/ICQ podcast for the videos that we've done at Ham Radio 2018 at Friedrichshafen. And guys, we're hoping to do more videos later on in the year, so make sure you subscribe there and keep in touch. And as we mentioned on the show, we're now 10 years old, and we'd ask you to consider us. If you wish to send us a birthday gift, all you got to do is go along to icqpodcast.com/donate, where anything you send our way is always greatly appreciated. Well, that about wraps up this episode 272. Only last thing to do now is to hopefully you've got some nice fresh milk in the fridge, chocky bicky, and time to make some tea.
Certainly have, Colin, certainly have. But 10 years, God, yeah. I never thought it was going to go this long. And, I appreciate our listeners. Keep listening. What a great 10 years we've had. So anyway, I'm off to make Mrs. B her cup of tea as she comes in. I'd like to say 73s to all our listeners. And we'll do it again soon, won't we, Colin?
We sure will, guys. 73s, I'll catch you in a fortnight.